Hi, you're watching Reddit Shikstore, and if you're looking for a story that doesn't start with butterflies in your stomach and a happy ending, you've come to the right place. My name is Leo. I'm 51, and I'm a luthier. I restore vintage violins, cellos, violas. My world is one of aged spruce, flamed maple, and the ghosts of music past. I listen to the wood, to the silent stories in the grain. I find cracks no one else can see and mend them so perfectly the instrument sings stronger than before. I believe my marriage to Clara was my finest restoration, a beautiful, complex instrument we'd tuned together over 20 years. She was a senior editor at a prestigious literary magazine, her world one of words and whispers, of crafting perfect sentences. We were artists in different mediums, or so I thought. The first sign was a note out of tune. Not a screech, but a subtle flatness. Clara began humming a different tune around the house. Not our old folk songs, but something jazzy, unfamiliar. She'd catch herself and stop, a faint, secret smile playing on her lips. Just something I heard at work, she'd say. Work was now populated by a new name. Julian. Julian Thorne, a literary wunderkind they'd hired as a contributing editor. A writer of lyrical, devastating non-fiction. I'd met him once at a fundraiser. He had the carefully cultivated dishevelment of a man who'd never held a piece of sandpaper, all cashmere scarves and profound statements about the human condition. He'd looked at my workshop with polite, distant curiosity, as if it were a museum diorama of a lost trade. The evidence, like a hairline crack under the varnish, began to show. Clara, who'd worn the same delicate rosewater scent for a decade, started smelling of vetiver and clove, a dark, spicy cologne that clung to her clothes. It was always strongest on Thursdays, her late editorial meetings. She started wearing a silver necklace I'd never seen before, a simple, modern twist of metal. A gift from the team for closing the Faulkner piece, she said too quickly. A luthier's hands are sensitive. They feel the slightest imperfection. My life felt off. I began my quiet investigation. I didn't hack phones. I observed. I checked the family iPad she left charging in the kitchen. In her calendar, Thursday blocks were labeled Manuscript Review JT. The location was never the office. It was a coffee shop in the West Village, a park bench in Brooklyn Heights, once even a noted jazz club that opened early for private events. The definitive proof came not from data, but from dendrochronology, the study of tree rings to date wood. In our case, it was a wine stain. Clara and I shared a bottle of Pinot Noir every Friday night. One Thursday, she came home late, flustered, went straight to shower. The next morning, I was doing laundry. On the collar of her cream silk blouse, the one she'd worn to work, was a tiny, burgundy splash. The shape, the saturation, it was from a wine glass, pressed against her in an intimate toast. The Pinot Noir we drank was a lighter vintage. This was a Cabernet. A stranger's wine on my wife's skin. I followed her the next Thursday. I told her I was delivering a restored cello to Princeton. Instead, I sat in my van outside the jazz club in the afternoon. I saw them. He arrived first, then her. He kissed her cheek, his hand lingering on her arm. They disappeared inside. My world didn't shatter. It petrified. Turned to cold, silent stone. The music in me died. All that was left was the precision of my craft and a vast, echoing emptiness where my heart had been. Revenge? The thought was vulgar. But the need for correction, for restoration of a fundamental balance, was absolute. Destroying Julian's literary career would be easy. A plagiarized phrase from his early work, anonymously sent to his rivals. But that was like smashing a cheap fiddle. No artistry. It would make him a martyr, and Clara his devoted nurse. No. I had to dismantle the symphony they thought they were composing. To make every note they played together sound false. I had to attack not his livelihood, but his mythology. Julian Thorne's currency wasn't money, it was his perceived depth, his tortured artist soul, his authenticity. That was his instrument. And I knew how to make an instrument betray its player. I immersed myself in his world. I read every essay, every interview. He had a tell. He constantly referenced his year of silence spent in a cabin in Maine, a period of profound introspection that shaped his voice. It was the cornerstone of his persona. I hired a discreet investigator from Maine. For a modest fee, he found the truth. The cabin belonged to a cousin. Julian had spent 3 months there, mostly on his laptop with satellite internet, blogging about the unbearable silence. The local general store owner remembered him for buying gourmet coffee and complaining about the Wi-Fi. I also learned, through Clara's careless comments she thought were admiring, that Julian was intensely superstitious. He carried a lucky fountain pen, a gift from a dead mentor. He had a ritual of reading one particular poem by Rilke before writing. In violins, a wolf tone is a disruptive, wailing harmonic that occurs at a specific pitch. It ruins the music. I needed to create a psychological wolf tone in their affair. I created a character. Arthur Finch. An elderly, retired professor of literature living in Vermont, a lifelong subscriber to Clara's magazine. I gave him a Gmail account and a genteel, sharp writing style. I had Arthur write a letter to the editor, but addressed personally to Julian, care of the magazine. It was a masterpiece of backhanded praise. Dear Mr. Thorne, it began. Eve, read your latest with interest. Your prose strives for the lyrical heights of the greats you so often name-drop, Didion, Baldwin. Yet, it reminds me of a student I once had, all technique and no heart. He, too, wrote beautifully about silence, having never truly experienced it. There is a scent of the inauthentic in your work, sir. A borrowed gravitas. Perhaps it is the curse of the prematurely celebrated. Yours, with disappointing regard, Arthur Finch. I mailed it on fine stationery. The blow was perfectly aimed. It questioned his talent, his authenticity, and his sacred year of silence. It came from a credible, unassailable source, a discerning elder. Clara, as his editor, would have seen it. He would have been apoplectic. I imagined their Thursday meeting that week, him ranting about a jealous old hack, her trying to soothe him. The first seed of doubt, was there a ring of truth to it, poisoning her admiration? Julian's lucky pen. A Mont Blanc Meisterstück. I found the exact model. In my workshop, with the patience of centuries, I created a replica. Not a perfect one. I aged it slightly, but I also gave the gold nib a minuscule, almost invisible flaw, a asymmetry that would cause it to skip ink at unpredictable moments. A writer's nightmare. The next time Clara visited my workshop, I staged a phone call from a distraught client and had to leave abruptly, leaving the replica pen on my workbench near her coat. She saw it. She knew what it was. The temptation was too great. When I returned, the pen was gone. She had stolen it for him, a grand, romantic gesture, replacing his lost talisman with an identical one. Except this one would betray him. His writing would become fraught with glitches. His ritual, corrupted. He'd blame himself, his own failing talent. The superstitious dread would seep into his bones. The climax was at their literary magazine's biggest fundraiser, a black tie gala at the New York Public Library. I was Clara's +1. Julian was the evening's rising star. I waited. I watched them orbit each other, their stolen glances charged with the thrill of the secret. Then, during his brief speech, it happened. His pen, the replica, failed as he went to sign a copy of the magazine for a donor. A ugly ink blot stained the page. He flushed, stuttered. It was a small thing, a hiccup. But I saw his confidence crack. Later, as Clara and I were leaving, I orchestrated my finale. We passed Julian near the coat check. He was holding a glass of whiskey, looking shaken. I stopped, extended my hand. Julian. Leo. Clara's husband. We met briefly. I just wanted to say, your speech was interesting. He forced a smile. Thank you. Kind of you. Not at all, I said, my voice a calm, neutral tone. I was particularly struck by your mention of listening to the quiet. It reminded me of my work. You see, when I restore an old violin, the most important thing isn't the repair. It's identifying the original voice of the instrument. Sometimes, people try to make a Stradivarius sound like a Guarneri. They force it. And in doing so, they create a fundamental dissonance. The instrument never truly sings again. It just groans under the weight of the lie. I held his gaze. My words were innocent on the surface, professional chatter. But they were laden. Original voice. Dissonance. Lie. I saw the blood drain from his face. He looked from me to Clara, a flicker of raw panic in his eyes. Did he know? Did she? I smiled warmly. Well. Must be getting on. The babysitter charges a fortune. I gently guided Clara away. In the taxi home, she was silent as a tomb. Finally, she spoke, her voice a thread. What did you mean by that? About the lie. I looked out the window at the flowing lights of the city. Exactly what I said, darling. An instrument, or a person, can only bear the weight of its true nature. Anything else is a performance. And performances always end. She never asked about the pen. She never mentioned Julian's name again. A month later, he abruptly took a sabbatical and moved to Berlin. The magazine's gossip was that Head had a creative crisis. Clara and I are still married. Our home is a perfectly preserved museum of our former life. We are courteous. We are quiet. The silence between us is no longer comfortable, it is the profound, ringing silence of a concert hall after the last, discordant note has faded. I hear it constantly. I won. I restored the outward form of my life with the precision of my craft. But the music is gone. I am the luthier living inside a beautifully crafted, utterly silent violin. And sometimes, in the deep of night, I think I can still hear the ghost of that wolf tone, wailing in the empty space where love used to resonate.